Hey everybody, welcome back to Truth Revealed. Today we are going to continue looking into the murder of Brian Thompson, the former CEO of UnitedHealthcare. The day after Brian Thompson was murdered, I looked at a statement that his wife Paulette Thompson had made to NBC News. At the end of this video, we'll go back and look at some of the key points from Paulette Thompson's statement and how they factor into the equation. However, in recent developments, Ken Klippenstein has released what he's saying is Luigi Mangione's Manifesto, and he titled it The Why I Did It. So that's what we're going to key in on here today. But before we do that, I'm Sergio Denaro. I'm a former human intelligence collector. I'm trained in deception detection and verbal analysis. And if you want any more information about my background, just check out my bio on my homepage. So now let's dive into the subject's statement. From this point forward, I'll be referring to Luigi Mangione as the subject. The key point to remember as we look at this statement is this is an open statement. This wasn't prompted by someone else asking him a question. Because this is a completely open statement, it means that he has complete control of the parameters of this. He is not being forced to answer something that he doesn't want to. He is free to give the information that he wants you to have. That is the most important thing that we want to keep in mind as we go through and look at this. Now, before we analyze this, let's look at the whole statement in its entirety here. To the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial. Some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience. The spiral notebook, if present, has some straggling notes and to-do lists that illuminate the gist of it. My tech is pretty locked down because I work in engineering, so probably not much info there. I do apologize for any strife or trauma, but it had to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. A reminder, the US has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly number 42 in life expectancy. United is the indecipherable largest company in the US by market cap behind only Apple, Google, and Walmart. It has grown and grown, but has our life expectancy? No. The reality is these indecipherable have simply gotten too powerful and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allowed them to get away with it. Obviously, the problem is more complex, but I do not have space, and frankly, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person to lay out the full argument. But many have illuminated the corruption and greed, e.g. Rosenthal, Moore, decades ago, and the problems simply remain. It is not an issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games at play. Evidently, I am the first to face it with such brutal honesty. Okay, so that's his statement. Now let's analyze this statement. There's some things we want to keep in mind here. Number one, I don't know with absolute certainty this statement is from him. It could be a hoax, a false statement that wasn't even made by him. Now, if this was a statement that was actually retrieved from him, there's numerous possibilities we need to keep in mind. Was it planted on him by the FBI, the feds, the police? Was this written by him, but was he coerced or forced to do it? Was he a paid hitman? That was something that we looked at in the first video, which doesn't seem likely at this point now with more information coming in, but it's still a possibility that still hasn't been ruled out at this point. We need to keep a wide open mind. I could be analyzing a statement that wasn't even written by him. So, to the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. This is direct and fits the formula of I plus the correct tense plus active voice. Because it's an explanatory statement, we expect that here. It means there's sensitivity and he's explaining something. Remember, in an open statement, you're only saying what you want to. So when you start to explain yourself, it means you're anticipating some sort of pushback or questions from the person who's reading this. And so you feel the need to further explain yourself. So he says, because I do respect what you do for our country. What does that tell us? This is an indication of social intelligence and empathy on his part here. My analysis here is he respects law enforcement and the government, but not corporations, because he literally says to the feds, I do respect what you do for our country. This is interesting. I haven't read a lot of manifestos, but they usually don't start with an element of emotional intelligence or of saying, I do respect, especially the government. So someone in this situation to start out by saying that they respect the government, that's just interesting and something we want to note. Because he says, I do respect what you do for our country. And he's talking about law enforcement. federal law enforcement. So he says, to save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. All right, this is the correct formula again. We have I plus the correct tense, I wasn't working with anyone. That's another thing we need to keep in mind here is when was this written? Was this written after the fact while he was sitting there in McDonald's? Or did he write this out as his manifesto that if he was caught right after the incident, that they would have a note from him that he was able to think through when he had time, not just a statement that was off the cuff and he wasn't able to get his message across. And he's using I and active voice. He's showing empathy towards law enforcement. Again, I want to save you a lengthy investigation. So this is the second time that he has shown respect towards law enforcement in the second sentence here. A clear statement that no one else was involved. So why make this statement? That's the question that I'm asking myself. Why does he feel that it's necessary at this point to inform you that nobody else was involved? Again, why is he trying to save them a lengthy investigation? He's now mentioned this twice. Let's just keep that in mind. First instance of telling the public that this investigation should be quick and shallow. This is okay if this is the only instance of this. It's stated once and done. My analysis here, the subject doesn't want the investigation to be lengthy. He says that. He doesn't want to inconvenience the government, the feds. So why is he so concerned about inconveniencing the government and the feds? Is it that he actually doesn't want to inconvenience them? Or is it that there's something that he's hiding, that he wants to project that all of this is very simple and straightforward and he doesn't want them to dig any deeper than they have to? And if he presents all the information up front, he feels like they don't have to dig any deeper after that. So those are two things that are on my mind right now. The third sentence here, this was fairly trivial. Trivial is an interesting word. Trivial means unimportant. Some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience. The spiral notebook, if present, has some straggling notes and to-do lists that illuminate the gist of it. We want to pay attention to words that seem out of place or illogical in what they're trying to explain. This was fairly trivial. He doesn't say exactly what he's referring to here, but it insinuates the planning process or the murder itself. Well, what exactly is unimportant? Some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience. The spiral notebook, if present. Now, if he's writing this after, I don't know when, it could have been an hour after, but I'll keep saying in McDonald's because he was sitting there eating. I'm imagining that he's there writing this manifesto while he's doing that, as opposed to before the murder, when he's sitting at his desk before he embarks on this journey of his. So if present has some straggling notes, if he's sitting in McDonald's and he's writing his manifesto here, then why would he say if the notebook is present? It's either in his bag, he has it, or it's not. So when he says if present, this now leads me to believe that he's writing this before he actually went to conduct the murder. So this would be projecting here. I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. Technically, this should be that I'm not working with anyone, but you would project yourself into the future if you're thinking that this is going to be read after the murder. So this can be explainable, but if present, this is a very clear and specific word that is not a tense change. It's not confusion in the tense that's caused by trying to figure out whether he's projecting himself into the future or not. This simply says if the notebook is present, which means he's writing this before the murder. If the notebook is present, has some straggling notes and to-do lists that illuminate the gist of it. So past tense regarding planning stage is correct, but there's lack of I. He doesn't say, I did some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, I had a lot of patience. There's a missing I in here. That missing I means a lack of commitment, which means that he's glossing over too much planning and misrepresenting the difficulty in the planning. Why is that actually pertinent? Why do we care? Because of the question that we asked ourselves earlier. Does he actually have this monumental respect for the feds or the government? Or is there something about this that he's trying to gloss over because there's something buried deep that he doesn't want the feds to find? So if he's now glossing over how difficult this was, it would indicate that he wants the investigation to be quick and shallow for the purpose of not finding something, not that he necessarily has all of this love and respect for the FBI. This statement is beginning to push the idea too hard that the investigation should be simple. He has now referenced this in all three of his first sentences, that he wants this investigation to be quick and simple. and easy. So we want to be aware at this point that the author doesn't want the public to believe that this investigation should go in depth. That's important, and we gotta keep that in mind as to why. Why does he not want this investigation to go in depth? All of this is problematic. I think he's concerned that the feds are going to find something that he doesn't want uncovered. So he's trying to give every indication that this is easy up front. There's no reason to look deep. My tech is pretty locked down because I work in engineering. So he's back to using I again, because I work in engineering. So probably not much info there. He has 2 explanatory statements in here, which indicates sensitivity, not necessarily deception. He's over-explaining when he uses 2 explanatory statements. So it's pretty locked down because I work in engineering. He's saying that he's an expert in this, and then he's giving you an explanation as to why. I would expect somebody to say, why? Why is your text so locked down? But then he says, so probably not much info there. That is now, I think, giving us a glimpse as to what is being covered up, because now he's specifically saying, don't look here. There's not much info there. Why is he telling the FBI at this point where to not look, is what I'm asking myself here. So this is an indicator of where we should start looking. Something about his job in engineering is probably a good place to start digging as to information that he may not want people to find. So not much info there, in combination with the explanatory statements, means this is either deceptive or a third attempt to shorten the investigation. I do apologize for any strife of trauma, but it had to be done. Okay, there's a tense problem here. He does use the word I first to begin with, but if he wrote this before the shooting, then he would have written, but it has to be done. Okay, so can he project himself into the future in this statement, or can't he? Now, I can't say with 100% certainty that he doesn't have the ability to project himself into the future here, but let's think this through. Could he say, but it had to be done? So he's sitting there before the murder and he's writing, thinking that you're going to be reading this after the murder, and he's writing, it had to be done. That doesn't make sense to me, because if something is bothering you enough that you're going to murder someone, aside from the fact that murder itself is traumatic, difficult, emotionally complex act, it also will destroy his life. And some people may not have any emotional response to killing somebody. They may just feel like it has to be done. But destroying your own life at the same time, having no sense of self-preservation, as well as having no empathy and no emotion about killing someone else, I have to ask myself, does he seem like that type of person? And I have to say that he does not seem like that type of person. He has already shown emotional intelligence in 2 different statements up to this point. And so the idea that he is going to go out and kill somebody and destroy his own life in the process would have to take an emotional toll on him. There's just no way that it couldn't. So if there is something that is so egregious that he's willing to do this, it has to be overwhelmingly powerful. So empathy method, right? Let's put ourselves in his shoes here for a minute. Can I think of anything that I would be willing to do this? Yeah, if somebody killed my kids, I would definitely have this type of response. I wouldn't have any problem premeditating, going out, figuring out how I'm going to do it. So that's the scenario that I'm envisioning when I put myself in his shoes. I'm writing this ahead of time. I'm writing the note that you're going to find and read after as to why I did this. I do apologize for any strife or trauma. I would probably be more specific. I apologize for any strife or trauma to his family, but it has to be done, because I can't project myself in the future when I'm thinking of something that is so powerful that I'm going to probably kill myself and this other person. And the reason for doing this has to be all-encompassing. It has to be bigger than my life and his life put together. Now, keep in mind, he says, I apologize for any strife or trauma. He's not a psychopath. He clearly has emotional intelligence and empathy. And so this is the wrong tense. This is problematic. I don't think he could possibly at this point say, it just had to be done. It's almost like you have to reconvince yourself in that moment. This has to be done. And so this is the wrong tense, and this is problematic here. This statement would have had to have been written after the shooting, unless he is projecting himself into the future, which would indicate a lack of personal investment in the killing. So there's just something fundamentally wrong that we can't figure out. Let's continue. Another indication of emotional intelligence, the apologizing. This statement is directly telling you that he has weighed the emotional toll that this will take on Brian Thompson's family, and his reason for doing it is so powerful that it trumps that emotional damage. And he wants you to know that. It's one thing to think that. It's taking it to another level to feel that it's important to him that you know that. He wants the entire world to know that what he's doing is going to kill somebody. He's going to end his own life. And he's also aware of the emotional strife and the trauma that that's going to cause to Brian Thompson's family. That is a big burden to carry. What that's doing is that's building up to something huge. I'm waiting now. What is it? What is the reason? This is the manifesto. It's titled Why I Did It. Why did you do it? So this has got to be big. I'm listening. What is it? And he says, frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. Okay, well, that's not a why I did it. They had it coming. That's more buildup. This is not a reason. This is what I'm saying here. Number one here, this is not a reason. And parasites is plural. That's problematic because if he's writing this before the incident, that means there's more than one. Was he going into this with the intention of killing more than one of them, either at this conference or later on? Was he trying to escape so that he could kill another healthcare CEO at some point in the future? It's not an explanation as to why he did it. It's just more information on the plan, I guess. These parasites simply had it coming. The use of plural could also mean that he wasn't targeting Brian Thompson specifically, that he was just going to shoot the first CEO that he recognized. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. The fact that it's plural could be in reference to the group. Like he wasn't sure when he left which one of them he was going to kill because they all have it coming. So either this was one attack and he didn't know who he was going to kill when he set out, or this was a planned series of attacks over time, which would be, why would he try to escape but also keep another gun? And he had another suppressor, or he had taken the suppressor off and it also fit the second gun, but he had multiple guns. That tells me that he was trying to get away, not to get away with it, but because he was trying to kill as many CEOs in charge of healthcare systems as he could before he got caught, is the only reason I can think of why he wouldn't destroy all the evidence. He got caught, 5 days after the shooting? He had more than enough time. In fact, when he threw his backpack with the gun that he used to shoot Brian Thompson, wherever he dumped it, he could have thrown all of the evidence away at the same time. And then he would be on his own without any evidence on his person when he got caught. So the fact that he didn't throw it all away means, in my mind, it's telling me here that he had the intent to try and work his way back. Or he might have assumed that the entire conference would have been canceled once he killed one of them, and he was going to try to lay low somewhere and hit another one. So he didn't want to get rid of the stuff that he had with him. All right, when I was going through this, I'm looking also at structure. I'm trying to figure out where is the information that comes in before the incident itself, and then the information that comes after the incident. In here, the incident is going to be the motive. That's what he's setting out to answer here. So he needs to give you all of the lead in, and then at some point he needs to give you the motive. I'm doing this because of this. I've heard a bunch of reasons why that are basically made up. I heard one guy say he had stage 4 cancer and he was denied treatment. So he was upset, he's terminal, and he decided to kill him. Okay, that would be a good motive. That would be in the manifesto here, where he would describe his personal incident. This is why I'm doing this. This is why they're so corrupt. And then there should be something after that explains the emotional trauma that the reason for killing him has caused. This is what is happening to me. I'm going to die anyways. This shouldn't happen to anybody else, and I want to make this public. I want the entire world to know. I want my life to have some sort of a meaning. And he's an emotional person. We've already seen that. So there's going to be emotion of how this whole incident affected him in this statement. The manifesto is going to have the lead up, the information, then it's going to have the reason, the motive, and then it's going to have how that affected him at the end. So far, it doesn't look like we've gotten the motive yet. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming is not a motive. It's a lead in. Then he says, a reminder, the US has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly 42 in life expectancy. Okay, this is actual information, so we know we haven't hit the motive yet. United is the indecipherable largest company in the US by market cap, behind only Apple, Google, Walmart. It has grown and grown, but has our life expectancy? No. Okay, so he's still building up to this. He doesn't use I in here, so none of this is personal to him. This is still information that he's giving us as to what's leading to the motive. So we'll keep going here. The reality is these indecipherable have simply gotten too powerful, and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allowed them to get away with it. Is that the motive? At this point, the motive is not coming across powerfully or directly. So we got to keep analyzing here. Abuse is a powerful word here. The problem with this, though, is it's in reference to our country. It's not personal to him. He's not saying they continue to abuse me and my family. He's saying they're abusing our country. So it's a powerful word, but that's not the motive here. For immense profit. Okay, again, more information. Yes, immense profit. I'm with you. I'm agreeing actually with what he's got in here so far, because the American public has allowed them to get away with it. Okay, this statement shows hostility towards the American public. This is weird. He says, because the American public has allowed them to get away with it. He's just now starting to place blame, and the only blame that he has placed is on the American public. So it's on you. He's saying that they're doing this, but you're the one that's letting them get away with it. The statement about corporations is factual, not personal. They abuse our country. Again, that's a powerful word that sounds personal, but he doesn't say they continue to abuse me and my family. He says they're abusing our country. And so he takes the personal nature out of that. In this section of the statement, I would expect an explanation of the abuse. Without an explanation, this is just a statement that someone thought seemed right here and didn't feel it. This is deceptive. So the use of the word abuse, but then not actually vocalizing what the abuse is problematic. It means that whoever wrote this, whether it was him or not, they thought logically this is where this information should go, but they didn't feel it. So it's problematic. Remember that what this is boiling down to is that whoever wrote this is blaming the American public for allowing them to get away with it. Let's keep moving forward here. Obviously, the problem is more complex, but I do not have space, and frankly, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person to lay out the full argument. Okay, we have uncontracted statements here. We do have use of I. We have I here. I do not pretend. So he's putting himself back into the statement again. The problem is more complex, but I do not have space. So what he's telling you is, I'm not going to actually tell you what the problem is. I'm not reading into this in order to garner that. He's literally telling you, the problem is more complex, but I do not have space. And frankly, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person to lay out the full argument. This is a very problematic statement. Why does he take the personal responsibility for a murder and basically destroying his own life if he doesn't understand the full argument? He says, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person to lay out the full argument. There is no explanation for this statement that is not flat out wrong. When you're writing a manifesto, what you're saying is the opposite of this. I am pretending to be the most qualified person to talk about this. Now, you don't say it like that, but what you should be reading here is what happened to me, what I've seen with my own eyes makes me a true expert on this. There are people who study this, but they don't understand that denying my healthcare that is going to kill me, this happens to millions of people. These people are murderers. You study this, but you're not an expert. I've lived it. I'm the real expert. That is what a manifesto is. That is not what you're seeing here. You're saying him literally say, I'm not going to put it in here. I don't have the space, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert. That's wrong. That is not something that he would have written in here. Or if he did, there has to be some sort of mental issues, some mental disassociation. This is stuff we're going to analyze at the end, but just keep in mind that you can't see a sentence like this in a manifesto. So why does he take personal responsibility for murder if he doesn't understand the full argument? He uses uncontracted statements, which is deceptive. How is that deceptive? Well, he says, I do not have space. So it's an excuse to not give you the details. And that excuse is deception. He's glossing over the problem, indicates that he doesn't actually know what the motive to kill Brian Thompson was. That's what the deception from the uncontracted statements means. I don't have the space. How does he not have space? Flip the page over and you can keep writing. And he doesn't say, I don't have the time. He says, I don't have the space. And frankly, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person. So he's simply making an excuse for not giving you the motive. He's not answering the question why I did it. And he's giving you this really, really bad excuse for not giving you that information. There's an insinuation here that he is writing this after the murder and doesn't have time to complete it. This means the if present statement above is out of place. So if I don't have space and I don't have time, we still haven't figured out whether this was written before the murder or after the murder, because we have tense problems. We have knowledge of the present problems. If you don't know if the notebook is present, it means you can't be writing this in the present. What is he trying to say here? But I don't have the space, meaning I could write 1 trillion terabytes worth of information and there doesn't exist enough memory in the world for all the information that I have. That can't be right, because he says, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person. What he's saying is, I don't have the knowledge. This is just very problematic. We can't tell if he wrote this after the murder or before, and he's telling you that he doesn't actually have the information. But many have illuminated the corruption and greed. Now he's actually passing this off to someone else. Rosenthal more decades ago, and the problems simply remain. I don't know what the problems are. These guys know what the problem is. That is not something that somebody is going to pick up a sword and go out and say, oh, I just read Rosenthal and I'm going to go and murder somebody now. There's no direct connection there. This still has not become personal to him. It is not an issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games at play. Okay. Why isn't he explaining what this means? Power games. It's not an issue of awareness. Now, again, he is really blaming the American people. He says he's not an expert. It's not an issue of awareness at this point. He's saying these guys have identified it before. The American public's just too stupid to do anything about it. Is that what he's saying? Because that's the only actual animosity that he has shown in here is towards the public. But clearly power games at play. This is unexplained. This is too vague of a term to leave this completely thrown in but unexplained. What are the power games? Evidently, I am the first to face it with such brutal honesty. Honesty? What's honesty? How is killing, how does that equate to honesty? He hasn't even told you why. He hasn't said, I'm going to murder a CEO because there's just no information. So the brutality makes sense, but not the honesty in this statement. But this is another shot of anger towards the American public. What are we seeing here? So my final analysis, whoever wrote this, and I don't know, honestly, that the subject wrote this because there's too much missing. So whoever wrote this didn't take the time to come up with a motive. Was it written by the subject? That's my biggest question now. We got to start with that question. The tenses are wrong. When I say the tenses are wrong, I mean the tenses and the information from whether it's before or after is all wrong. The fact that we can't pin down what is the correct tense is problematic here. The structure is wrong. This statement, like I said earlier, it needs to have background story, an introduction, information, the motive, the incident, the answer to the question why I did this, which is what this is titled, and then it has to have an element of how this personally has affected him. We actually get 100% intro with 0 incident and 0 aftermath. So the structure is completely wrong, which makes this entire thing deceptive. But now we have to figure out how and why is this deceptive. That's important to note here. That question was never answered in here. Okay, I'm trying to narrow down who wrote this. So did the feds plant it? I've heard that a lot. The feds planted it on him. Because why would he have the extra gun? Why would he have all this stuff? The sympathy towards law enforcement seems odd, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they wrote it. Are they patting themselves on the back? Yeah, I mean, that's what it sounds like. But my personal belief is that if they planted it, they would have delineated a clear motive. Why would they plant bad evidence? This can't be used as a motive because there's no motive in here. They're parasites. Like, he called them a name. Just called them parasites, that's not a definitive motive. They can't go in court and say, see, he did this. He said he did this because they were parasites. That's not a motive. So I think that if this were planted, you would have seen this written in a way that more clearly implicates him, more clearly gives him a motive, and wouldn't give him any sort of an argument as to how it wasn't him, because this just doesn't really say anything. And so I don't think it was the feds. The mistakes in this statement seem thoughtless and rambling. The mistakes that I mentioned earlier were that there's no motive actually in here. The structure is all wrong. The tenses are all wrong. This leads me to believe that it has to be one of these things. The statement is either a hoax. This statement actually wasn't written by the subject. That would explain why whoever wrote this wasn't thinking about whether they were writing it before the incident or after. And so at some points, they're going to be writing as if it was before, and some points they're going to be writing as if it was after, because they're making up a story. And they're not putting themselves into this guy's shoes, saying, okay, I am him. I'm writing this now before the murder. I'm really pissed. Why am I pissed? Okay, let's start writing now. They didn't do a good job of creating a realistic scenario. Or the subject has mental issues that prevents him from expressing his true feelings. I don't know what mental issues would cause you to actually not express the motive in here. And then number 3, the subject is being coerced. For example, let's say a family member of his was taken hostage and they're going to be murdered if you don't go kill this guy. And now on the spot, he has to figure out how to do this, and he has to write something that he's pretending like he has a motive for this. If he's pretending that he has a motive, but he doesn't actually have a motive, you would see this type of rambling. I would think that you would still put a motive in there, but it would be difficult to say I have a terminal illness if he doesn't have a terminal illness. So if he was forced to write this and he was trying to come up with something, then it might come across as being this sort of gloss over their parasites, they make too much money. You know, it's not personal. That's, I guess what I'm saying is, if he was being coerced, then this wouldn't be personal to him. And so he wouldn't be able to create a manifesto that sounds personal. Or if the subject was paid to kill him. The last thing I'm throwing back in here, so at this point, I don't have any reason to believe that he was paid to kill Brian Thompson, but if he were paid and he was trying to come up with something to cover his tracks, what's his motive? If his motive was just to get paid, then he wouldn't have a personal motive, and this statement would come across very impersonal. The bottom line here is this is not a manifesto. It doesn't explain why he did it. That is not analysis. That's not reading into anything. It simply doesn't say it in here. I can tell that whoever wrote this doesn't have a personal attachment to this murder. That now leads us to need to answer the question of, was it a hoax that was just written by somebody else? Or if it was written by the subject, why does he have no personal attachment to this? Either he's coerced, or he's being paid to do this, or he just has mental issues. He maybe is schizophrenic. Maybe he has something that's telling him that he has to do this, but he doesn't feel like he's been wronged in any way. He may have a voice in his head that's telling him to do this. So that's what I'm getting from this. I don't have anything definitive or clear. I'm very curious what your thoughts are. So leave comments and let me know what you think could be the reason why we're seeing this type of statement with all these issues. Now, let's jump back to my first video here. I talked about Paulette having no emotional tie to Brian. She was apathetic. There was clear indicators of conflict in their relationship. I did that analysis the day after the shooting, before I knew that they were separated. So I was able to see that, and this leads me to a very important point here. I probably don't say this enough in my videos, but when I'm doing deception detection, there's 2 types of statements, binary and there's non-binary. A binary statement is going to be something like, did you go out with Lois last night? The answer to that, if it's a lie, it means yes, he did. It's either one or the other. If I can tell that they're lying, then I know what the truth is. Statements like this, these are non-binary. The fact that he has no personal tie to this murder, that doesn't automatically mean that he's being coerced or that he's being paid or that this is a hoax. There's a bunch of possible answers. The only thing that we know with certainty by looking at this is that this is not a manifesto. He is not personally, emotionally tied to this killing, because this was his platform to explain that to you, and he didn't explain it. He either chose not to, or it simply wasn't there. The emotional reason for killing Brian Thompson simply wasn't there. It doesn't exist. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. When we looked at the statement by Paulette, aside from the conflict and the apathy, she made a statement, she doesn't know the details. That was a very out of place comment, and it's still out of place. But if she were the loving wife who was living with her husband at that time, then the conflict and the apathy would have been hidden. If that was hidden, that is a direct motive, and then everything else would make sense because of that. The fact that her apathy wasn't hidden, they were separated. I just didn't find that out until the next day. That explains that part, but now we have some loose ends with the rest of it. So what information did she have that she was withholding? Well, it's not necessarily about hiring a shooter. Now it could be affairs that he had. It could be threats that he had that were not healthcare related. Maybe Brian was having an affair with a woman who had a husband, and the husband was threatening him for something that was not related to his job or position. So the information that Paulette has is non-binary, and the indicators that we were seeing there are leading to something, but I have nothing to tie it to. She wasn't asking any direct questions, and her statement was very short. So there's information there that will make sense eventually, but as many of the comments after my video very astutely noticed the next day, that they were separated. That's the reason why we look at these statements, we figure out what's right and wrong with them, and then we have to come up with ideas of what the truth could be, and then check those off. So figure out, was it Paulette? Well, we don't know that it wasn't, but we do know that the contempt for her husband wasn't hidden. So that really undermines that idea of a motive. Now we have to keep all options open. Seeing the analysis of this manifesto here, what do you think about the fact that he never actually said what his motive was? Or do you disagree with me? Do you think that the statement up here where he says, frankly, these parasites simply had it coming, do you think that is the level of emotion that you would have if you were about to go murder somebody and destroy your own life in the process? Is there an actual reason in here that I missed? Let me know, and I will put out more videos as I learn more. All right, thanks for checking out my videos, and if you like them, please subscribe, like, all that stuff. With that being said, I'll see you in the next video.